My name is Bob Lupone, and I'm the director of the New School for Drama here in New York City. And we're here with us, the chair of playwriting, Pippin Parker. And also tonight we're interviewing John Robbie Bates. And let me just give you a little bit of his bio. Pardon me for reading, but he's an award-winning playwright, a distinguished artist in residence, and for the 2009-2010 academic year here at the New School for Drama. Robbie is a Pulitzer finalist, a Guggenheim and NEA Fellow, a winner of the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award, a founding member, and former artistic director of New York Naked Angels Theater Company, which Pippin was as well. Bates has written a number of acclaimed plays, including The Film Society, The Substance of Fire, 3 Hotels, A Fair County, 10 Unknowns, Ms. Lansky-Zelinsky, and The Paris Letter. His new play, Love and Mercy, will be produced next season on Broadway. Bates' experience in television includes creating the hit ABC show Brothers and Sisters and serving as executive producer for the first 2 seasons. He's also written episodes for West Wing, Alias. His PBS film version of 3 Hotels won the Humanitas Award. His other screenplays include...
I didn't do it. It's not my fault. I mean, this is so mortifying.
I know. He include The Substance of Fire, based on his play, and People I Know, which starred Al Pacino. And Bates is currently working and writing as an executive producing a miniseries for HBO entitled Cheney's War. Please welcome John Robbie Bates. I know a lot of you think about, when you graduate, you're thinking about possibly forming your own theaters. And on stage with us tonight are 2 guys who actually did do that.
Well, 3 guys, actually, because you did it too.
I did too, but I was leaving myself out of the equation. But in any event, 2 successful theaters. So I just thought I'd ask you, first of all, what was the motivating factor to start your own theater?
I think with Naked Angels, it was actors.
It was at the. There were a bunch of actors who started to get work, but they were working out of town, and they would come and we kind of played cards and whatever. I don't know, however we amused ourselves, but it was not working. And the idea had been sort of floating around for a while to have a place to work when these guys. It was mainly guys at first.
Voracious heterosexuals.
Yes, it was very, yeah.
Like I'd never seen actors
Right.
who were so unabashedly, completely.
That led to its own problems later. But,
it's like a rape
so it's a
club.
place to work. A place to work when you were professional actors to work while they were in town. Work when they don't have gigs. That was the beginning. But soon we got smart and got some playwrights involved and directors.
And what made you decide to do new plays as opposed to just texts that actors would work on, like modern classics?
We read, Golden Boy, and we started off with a weekly play reading series.
We did
that
endless workshop.
Endgame that went on for about a few years.
It was it was a workshop. It was like something from a hidden Polish theater company. It kept happening.
Yeah.
It would just develop with this incredibly beautiful, organic life of its own, but nobody ever saw it.
No.
It was
Well,
very
and
private.
also the people were crazy.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
there's
the
that.
actors. But yeah.
That's
But I think there were some young playwrights.
Right.
And Robbie had worked with Rob Morrow, so I think
Rob dragged me in,
Yeah.
and I just had my first play done, and it. I don't know. All of the actors knew younger playwrights.
Mm-hmm.
We were younger. Frank Pugliese, to wit,
Mm-hmm.
and Nicole Burdett, and it was out of that it grew, actually.
And so the instinct to create a home for yourselves, to have a community, and to actually do the work is what we all aspire to, which is what you were following your lead as well. But what is it that surprised you about the effort? What is it that surprised you in terms of, like, there's a lot of a lot of experience in that smile, Pippin.
well, you probably could
I-
do better to not spend the first 3 years arguing about what the name is going to be. That was a lot of time.
Or whether new people could join.
Yeah, whether new people could join.
Yes, there was a group. We were the expansionists,
Yeah.
the 2 of us, but there was a group of actors mainly, and I will say this with all deference, the actors who had less, shall we say, range, didn't want anybody else to join.
Yeah,
Right.
that is very true.
And so, but actually, if any of you do start a theater company, the thing is not to be too xenophobic about it, because it only grows from new blood, new energies, new thought.
Yeah, and I think that the Steppenwolf had formed already, and that was another. So there was a version of a solid, and Wooster Group, of course, had existed too. There was an example of solid actor-driven companies,
Yeah.
but they were not working on new plays. I mean, Wooster Group aside, doing sometimes revivals and deconstructions and things. But Steppenwolf was really doing existing texts, so there wasn't the same kind of the part of the process about casting new plays and developing new plays and actors, and we need an actor for this. That didn't really exist because they decided to do a play because the 6 of them or 7, whatever, could do it. And we couldn't do that because as soon as we folded playwrights and young directors in, we realized that for it to be an artistic home for all of its members really meant embracing the entire process. We couldn't be dedicated to every single actor or writer. And I think that was, for us, that was healthy.
Right.
So, yeah. But we did also learn that I think all of us, you need to, if you're going to work in the professional world, you have to be out in the professional world and bringing that back to your company and infusing those experiences. When the company became, at the time, for any of us, the sole outlet or the sole manifestation of our professional desires and artistic desires, it's unhealthy and it gets unbalanced and you freak out. And
It turns into Lord of the Flies.
yeah,
really.
basically, yeah.
Actors
People
turn
calling
on
it,
each other.
yeah.
Exactly. We've all lived that through,
Yes.
through that. My theater is a playwrights theater. I was interested in playwriting, and new plays in particular, because I had written 3 bad plays, and I thought that they were just really wonderful. And when I realized how bad they were, and realized it really wasn't my calling, I had to start a theater with Bernie in terms of trying to create, again, that home and that community to create theater. But I'm curious, now that we're here at the New School for Drama, you had a vacancy. And what made you decide to choose, besides being your friend Robbie, what were the qualities that you were interesting as a faculty member?
Well, like a lot, I mean, Robbie's work is, yeah, no, it's not availability. Actually, quite a few playwrights would like to teach here, of very high caliber, but, well, Robbie's worked in all 3 media, in the major, in theater, film, and television. That's important because, as we were just talking about earlier, we feel the school as a whole feels some responsibility to give the graduates the tools they need to actually pay the rent when they get in the world to the best of their, to the best of our ability and the best of your ability. And for writers, that means working in film and television. If you want to be paid as a dramatic writer, applying your talent as a dramatist, film and television is basically what pays the bills. It's very, very difficult. In fact, I was trying to think of someone the other day. Is there anyone under 60 years old, a playwright who supports themselves primarily as a playwright or solely as a playwright? I don't think so anymore. It's
Not in this country.
Not in this country. So, that, and I mean, Robbie and I go way back, and I know that he's concerned about the process, concerned about theater. We've had a lot of discussions over the years about theater, the state of theater, his dedication to the theater, and that's the other component, is being able to say, this is how you take a scene apart, this is what you want to do to write a spec script or whatever, and also having a real serious dedication to theater and concern.
Excuse me, I wanted to share with you some of the observation I've had with Robbie since he's come here. We meet in the halls, and how you doing, Robbie? How you doing, Bob? I love it here. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Da 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 da. And through the course of a few months, there was a kind of change in him, which I would like him to comment on, with regard to his experience of teaching and what that was doing for him and what was coming back at him. And I thought you might be interested in that if you care to share some of that idea.
Well,
Or what teaching means to you.
Yeah, I had never taught really before. I had sort of taken over for Chris Durang at Juilliard for a few months once, but I wasn't really, I was, just sort of a presence there. And Marcia Norman was really teaching. So I hadn't really taught, but I had burnt out in LA. I'd created this TV show, which was like sort of a hazing, and I'd run it for the first season, and then sort of spectacularly managed to get myself fired because I, wanted it to be good. And just
Novel.
completely not the point there. And so I came back and I was really sort of shell-shocked. I mean, I was shell-shocked. And I thought, I'll just tell you a story. A really great actor I know once, he was in the Seattle Rep. He had gone to work on a TV show for a bunch of seasons. And then he left and he went to work at the Old Globe, and he was doing one of the Shakespeare tragedies, forget which one. And on the first day of rehearsal, this was after years of being the star of a awful TV show. They were sitting at the read-through, and he just put the script down and said, "Could somebody please tell me how to act, because I've forgotten." And that spoke to me in such a way. I came back sort of in that state, I think. I wanted to get back to the theater. I was very uncertain of my voice, of what I had to say. Had I burnt out too much in TV land and stuff? And I knew it was the right thing to do, but I came in not knowing. Within weeks, really, of teaching, I started to trust that my experience had actually added up to something, strangely enough, and that it wasn't that I was better, it was just that I'd done it longer, and that I could help less experienced playwrights trust their voices. And watching these playwrights who were very individuated anyway and had great ears and eyes and a sense of the world, watching them respond and come alive made me feel much, much better about myself. Not as a guy or a person, but just as someone who'd actually had some experience of it. And I fell in love with, I think particularly probably the New School more than other places where I've been a guest. And there are lots of really marvelous programs, and some of them are sort of preppy, pre-professional, tortoiseshell glasses and cashmere sweatery, and you leave them and know how to write, the play where grandma has cancer, and you catch it. You know what I mean. There's a tragedy in the basement. But what I've loved about the New School is that and I say this also with due deference, it's a place where one's freak flag can fly freely, and in a good way, in a great way that's not undisciplined and not contrary for the sake of being contrary, but is not essentially a sort of establishment-y program in the best sense. And so I fell in love very quickly with it, and now I don't know.
Now you need it.
Is there tenure here?
Can you describe a little bit what you mean by freak flag?
I can. Courage to be to be unafraid to fail on a big scale as writer. I'm only talking about the playwrights. I don't know the rest of you so much, but to take real risks in a way with deeply unconventional kinds of characters and alienations, and they're not polite playwrights. They're not polite plays. They're very probing, and they're very they hold nothing sacred, which is amazingly wonderful. They tend not to be impressed easily in a great way. So it's a kind of a sense of them getting it, and of sophistication, and of not being nervous about, it's a particular sort of new school thing. They're not nervous about who they are particularly. I remember I was a young playwright, you know, and I was at New York Stage and Film, and I'd written a couple plays, and they were being produced and stuff. But I was following John Shanley around and just sort of watching him like he was, you know, I was a dog, and he was sort of a fantastic new master come to get me out of the shelter. And I was just following him and sort of, I didn't realize it, but I was listening to him talk to someone, and he just all of a sudden reached over and grabbed my stomach and twisted it and said, "You are going to have to learn how to be your own person," and let go of my stomach. Well, they're not following me around, you know, which is what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I speak, obviously the school is weighted towards actors. That's the biggest population we have at the New School for Drama. You being a director as well, Pippin, and you as an author and a producer, Robbie. What do you look for in actors, particularly when you're trying to cast something, or what would your be advice to actors auditioning for you?
You want to go?
It's in the abstract. It's such a difficult thing to address because you tend to be working on a project and you get obsessed by roles and the characters. And as a playwright, you do too. The best directors, and I'm not one of them, but the best directors know when they read a character, they understand the expansiveness of what that character it could be in all its dimensions, and look for and have a conversation with the writer about what the essence of that is. So you need like the essence of the character plus everything it could be. In terms of the casting process, the audition process, that kind of thing, it's always, I mean, I tend to go for smart actors. I tend to go, and I tend to work on material that is probably, you know, verbally heavy, and I assume that actors are going to be emotionally available and be skilled. You know, I really like actors who know how to know that a character is both, you know, has a psychic range and an emotional range.
Mm-hmm. And can you see that in audition?
Yes. Well, you can certainly see, I mean, you can certainly see how an actor takes an adjustment. I mean, good directors always give adjustments in auditions just to see what an actor can do, whether or not, and it's, by the way, when you're given an adjustment, to let you know, in an audition, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your performance. At least half the time, it's just a director and a playwright wanting to see just how you deal with it. You get, you know, 4 minutes to decide who you're going to be locked in a room for 4 weeks with. It's scary. So yeah, I think you can. I think you can tell.
How about you, Robbie, in terms of?
I think it's a couple of things. First of all, it's a big you don't know what it is, but it's also you're trying to find someone whose potential to relax into a part is enormous. And by relax, I mean someone who comes in and asserts a certain amount of ownership right off the bat. It's the actor who's uncovered in some way. Sometimes it happens in odd ways. Sometimes an actor will come in, and if the part is for someone in an office or something, and they'll wear a suit to help them, but it doesn't help them.
It never helps.
It's always the very worst thing you can do because it displays a kind of great nervousness about the essence. So it's about the actor who's meditated in some way on this part, in some way, and they've reached a kind of conclusion that may surprise you or may be exactly right, but it is a conclusion. And I want to be shown something beyond just mere potential, I think. It has to do with intelligence and connectivity, you know. and shorthand. It's those actors who can find an instant kind of shorthand and who don't also take the thing literally, who look for the life under the surface of it. But that's what we're always looking for, you know.
Are you talking about a choice? Like I'm making sure that the actor comes in making a choice?
Yes, I do. I think it's important to make choices. You know, to be general in an audition tells me in a way that rehearsal is going to have to be a little bit about them asking you to show them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what being general is. It means you haven't committed to a position in some way. And I don't even care if it's the wrong position. I like the act, the bold act of possession, you know, the aggression towards it. They're very small things, but they also have to do with qualities that are almost invisible, you know, too, like, you know, nuance, spontaneity, you know. You look for that.
Confidence?
It's very much about confidence. You know, on the other hand, sometimes the nervousness can do wonders too. So it's as much a responsibility for me as the playwright or the producer, in the case of television mostly, to be open to that. You know, it's a harrowing experience for actors, and I wish it could be easier, but and I try and make it very easy.
I was going to say, I've been to the network a couple times, and you know, you walk into the office, and I had literally it's 22 people sitting in a 9x12. What would you tell an actor in that circumstance?
If someone's going to
As opposed to what I did.
if someone's coming into the network,
Tell them what that is first.
Okay, well, if you're doing a television show, for instance, and there's this terrible, again, hazing. That's the operative word in television, is hazing. You know, you might make it through the producers or the creator of the thing, like me and a director. And then if we like you, and this is in terms of a pilot, for instance, just a pilot to get a big part, you're also going to have to go to the studio and the network. And, you know, they're not decent enough to do it at the same time. That would be too easy and it wouldn't torture people, which is their secret, you know, pleasure, is torturing people. Not so secret. So you have this first audition with a group of people in a boardroom type room, you know, staring at you from across a table, literally with, I'm not kidding, with blackberries a-buzz and, you know, chiclets a-chewing and, you know.
And you have to have signed your deal already, right?
You have to have signed your
already
deal, so
even though you don't have the part, you have to sign
and then the
contract.
waiting room before that is you're sitting there with 3 other, you know, prisoners. and then you go through that, and then you go to the network, which, like, literally, if the studio or the sort of, you know, petty bureaucrat, they're the Senate to the Congress of the studio. The network, it's brutal. It's a room sort of like this, and you're a projection room usually, and there's the head of the network sitting there looking like he came from 3 Mile Island, and you don't even know what 3 Mile China syndrome. And then there's some, you know, supplicants and some, you know, suck-ups and some various scared, you know, fat-ass writers and minor figures and shit. And I'm sorry, I'm profane. I'm just so profane. But what I would tell an actor before that is it's this terrible thing. They've probably done it before, but if they haven't, you know, you say, just focus on me and not them, because I'm on your side. And you are on their side. Though sometimes people do this horrible thing, people who are producers, they'll bring in a sacrificial lamb, so that they'll bring in 2 people, say, and one of them is clearly not right. And, you know, as a way of psyching out the network, who's figured that move out in 1931. You know, but you try and hold on to the most personal aspect of the relationship you've built with the actor through process of coming to you, you know. In LA, they tend to forget how the people on my side of the table often forget how awful that day is for an actor. You know, it's 190 degrees, you're driving to Burbank, you don't even know where Burbank is. The air conditioner on your rented, borrowed cousin's car doesn't work. You got lost 3 times at the gate, they were mean to you. You've stupidly chosen to wear a suit and you're sweating. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And so you have to make it, just remember this, those of you who are actors. It is horrible, and anything you can do to make it not horrible, by acknowledging that it actually is horrible and then moving past it, is going to be great, you know.
And how about what do you say to writers? Like, you know, I've worked my 3 bad plays, Robbie. They didn't go anywhere. Help me. What do you say to writers, even whether it be a play or not getting a production or going to the network, whatever that means in terms of the writing world? How?
What's that? What is the question, hypothetically, literally? Like, it
Well,
can't
actors
just be,
suffer
help me.
actors suffer rejection, which you just described,
Yeah.
and so I know what you're talking about. But the same thing must be true for writers.
Oh, yeah, it's true for everything. I mean, I think you have to actually pretend it never happened somehow. You have to ignore it. You have to become absolutely unrealistic. You have to be slightly disassociative about it and live in a kind of perpetual state of optimism. You know, it is so easy to become cynical as an artist, and it's the kiss of death. It's over. It's just, the minute you shut down, there are so many people I know who are so much smarter than I am and who want to write, but they can't write because they punish themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They say, this isn't good enough. I know it isn't good enough, and I still keep doing it. And I think that's the thing, you know. So what? It's not good enough. Everything is a process, and it leads to the next play. It leads to the next audition. You know, I have so many friends who are actors, and they don't get stuff, and you say, it's your job now. That's your job, is doing this, and it leads to the next one, and it's not like you're never going to get one, you know.
It's true.
I think that just to add in, I think that it's also difficult in the world, in Los Angeles and in Somerset in New York, is that it's very easy. There's a lot of people involved in and around the business, if I can use that horrible phrase, that make you want to think that everything is going to be a life-changing experience. This is going to change your life, and it's horrible. And it may, in fact, in some rational way, make sense, but it makes no sense as an artist at all. And I mean, naturally, it's taken me quite a long time to learn this, to pass this on, but you just can't ride those. It's impossible. You have to find some equanimity, some sense of calm, or some sense of balance, because otherwise it's just, every time you go into a network, every time you send a play out, every time everything just gets, you know, it's very easy to feed into the mythology of this is going to change my life, and then I'll buy a co-op, and then I won't have to worry. Like, all my worries will go away. All those other worries will go away, and I can just do what I want. That's the big sort of fantasy as an artist. Like, if I could just get this. And it's not how it operates.
I think what operates is actually learning from failure is the most operative sort of system, where you don't do the same, make the same sort of, you fail bigger next time, you know, at least. And leaving aside the mercantile and California aspects of it, you know, if you can keep it private and own it. The best actors I know and the best directors I know, they keep something very, very private within themselves that they don't share. It's their own thing. And whatever that own thing is, I think, call it a soul. Because some people do it and they don't have souls, actually. Yeah, I'm serious. A lot of people do. Look, and so I'm assuming we all have souls. Yeah. Keep it.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for a while. What's your hope for the future in terms of theater or in terms of film or television for that matter? Like where do you think will be, what would you like your legacy to be 10 years from now in terms of what you're teaching these kids? And what would you like the industry to be, both film, TV, and theater to be 10 years from now?
Well, you know, people say the theater's dying. It's not dying. It's always been hard. It's always been punishing. It's going to be exactly like this forever.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
No, really? Do you really?
Yeah. And some years there'll be a little more money available to do things, and some years the collaborations will be great. But, you know, I hate the notion of a legacy. I would love it if, you know, because I don't believe in monuments, and but you know, if the experience for now and here of being in my class has been a good one, and you've learned something from it, I can't ask for more than that. I can't predict the future or I don't feel responsible enough for that. I feel like I can only be honest in myself and respond to these other personalities and be truthful and share my experience. You know, I don't think I'm going to be Mr. Chips and like there's going to be a generation of, you know, or it's going to be like, you know, that Robin Williams, Ethan Hawke movie. Right. What was that called?
Dead Poets Society?
Yeah, it's not going to be like Dead, I'm not going to be the great. But well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I have to look forward to, is being 70 and here. I don't know. It's too hard to know. I would like to think that I lit some candles along the way. That's all. I don't know. Or that someone could give me a job if I'm really.
Right. Tiffany, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I foresee satisfaction in going somewhere and opening a program and seeing that they graduated from the school for drama and the students who I have, you know, had the opportunity to work with, being out there in the world, and I think it'd be great if people started theater companies and made opportunities for themselves. I always say that, and I think and I hope really everyone does that. But I think Robbie's right in that we don't really know what those opportunities mean in some sort of grand kind of way. But there are many worse lives than being a working artist in New York.
And more than that, I think, not more than that, and in addition to that, I think if we've done something, and that's to encourage a sense of the artist as part of a larger world, as part of a political world, the artist's responsibility in some way, whether it's to themselves or to the culture they live in. I would like to think that the people who come out of this program, whether they're actors or playwrights or directors, have a real sense of what it means to be alive in the world right now, an individual, and can bring that to bear the way artists do and don't drift with uncertainty from, you know, event to event, but that have a real sense of purpose. Maybe it's sort of like outward bound, inward bound. I don't know.
I love that. I mean, I just love artists. You know, I love that speech. You know, I love the work that we do, and our society completely misinterpreting us all the time. But I love the work that we do as artists, which it's meaningful to come on stage, in my case, have a moment, go home, and remember that moment that I shared with a fellow actor, or to say, like the play that I'm doing right now, the pride, the writing, the writing, and then the acting, and the directing is tremendous joy for me, and it's not about money.
Well, your play that you're doing now, Joe, is directing, and last night we did this little, I don't know what it was, little soiree, the reading of some plays that was sort of over the 25-year course of Naked Angels, one of which was a play by Robbie, which was one of the first things Joe directed, I believe in 1990.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was really...
was his first, Outside, he'd done something at Circle Rep Lab, yeah.
Right.
And now he's directing my
and
new
now-
play.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, I didn't know that.
Yes, well,
So-
we're talking about Joe Montello, who
Joe
is
Montello.
a director of some repute here in this town.
Yeah,
and
he's directing the play at
he's doing a play at my theater, and also he's going to direct on Broadway, Love and Mercy. Do you want to talk a little bit about either your relationship with the director, or your relationship to the play, or your expectations for Broadway?
Oh,
or,
yeah, well, we used to live together for years, and we were a happily married couple, but now we're not. We're just really great friends and respect each other as artists, and it'd be nice to work together again after some years.
And the play?
I don't know how to talk about plays of mine before or even after. It always sounds like imagining things. In a weird way, it's a play, I want to just very briefly, about who owns, do you own your own history? How much of the history that you share with other people do you actually have the right to exploit in some way? And what it means to hold on to a box of secrets for a really long time, and it also explores the sort of falsity of people's politics, most of which are positions they assume rather than deeply felt intrinsic values. And that's something I've always been interested in as a playwright, this gap between who we think we are and who we really are, and who we present and who really is underneath all that. And it's that play for me.
I wish you well.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. I'm going to have to repeat the question because we do have a microphone. So please just speak into the microphone, not because we can't hear you, but the recording will work much better. So I open the floor if anybody has any questions. Just pass the mic. Ben? It's not, yes?
Microphones never work.
Yeah.
Even if it's a presidential town hall, they never work.
It's good? Okay. No, I was wondering what's the difference in writing for the three different mediums, television, theater, and TV, basically. Is there a significant difference?
They're very different. In fact, in a sense, writing for television is actually closer to writing a play. The writing for film is much more about pictures and establishing a sort of sequence of pictures that have a narrative drive, whether or not they have dialogue. It's another language entirely, whereas television, like the theater, depends on dialogue much more. You know, I like to actually be able to step back and forth between all three, sort of shifting my weight as I go.
I've always thought, I used to also try to be a director at one time, and, you know, the right brain and left brain, you know.
Yeah.
But can you go from, like, let's say, playwright to me is left brain, is that the subjective self, and film is right brain, it's
Yeah.
more picture. How do you bounce between the two?
In fact, the film depends much more on structure and much more on mathematics, I think, and much more on
Geometry.
a
and,
kind of
yeah.
geometry. Yeah, it does. It just does.
I mean, in terms of the writing or in terms of the composition of the picture?
No, the writing, the building, the architecture
Oh, I
of
see.
it. It does, and you know, they have to be sort of meticulously outlined for me in order to actually work. And the thing I'm doing at HBO, this is sort of 4-hour thing about Cheney and Bush. I spent a year writing an outline, or various iterations of an outline. And now, you know, the document is sort of 80 pages long, but it has sort of every scene in it. Because you have to make so many choices, whereas in the theater, I think those choices come much more organically to you. You know, you sort of sit down and get lost.
Right.
You can't get lost, I don't think, if you're writing a screenplay, unless, you know, you're writing from, like, for instance, I think Quentin Tarantino's screenplay for *Inglourious Bastards* is a dream in which he's lost. Even though it's pastiche and stuff, it's still a dream. But auteurs can do that. Wes Anderson is someone else who can do that, whose films feel like a dream now, but they're very different.
Right. Yes, Tyler? Let's pass the mic.
Hi, I'm a reader for theater, Bob's Theater actually, and I read a lot of scripts that come in, and it feels as though that people are really trying to recreate the brilliance of a show like Seinfeld on the stage, which is fine, but I think it's discouraging as an actor to like see the. It's discouraging to see plays or television shows that have nice wit but no story in them, and you've definitely raised the bar with what you've written for television, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And I guess my question is, what kind of story do you hope television to be able to tell, and what kind of stories do you see in it now? Because I feel like the stories in television are at a very status quo common denominator. I'm going to stop rambling.
Well, I think there are two different kinds of television now. Like, the Brothers and Sisters is sort of, you know, who's kissing who, and oh my God, there's another cousin, can I sleep with you? That's what it's become. When I envisioned it originally, it was sort of a show about an ascending American matriarchy and the decline of the sort of white male. All those guys we saw sitting on their hands at the State of the Union address, it was about the end of those kinds of guys. But you see those shows, that's what actually a show like Mad Men is, or, as I said before, Breaking Bad, or to some extent, even a show like Dexter, which sort of plays with ambivalence in a big way. So there are two televisions. The network model is I think, broken because it's all done by committee at this point. I guess what I'm looking for, were you asking specifically about television?
Yeah, I'm curious about television because I have a lot of hope. I'm curious about television because I have a lot of hope for the medium.
Yes, so do I. That's why I keep trying to do it.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I look for, you know, a kind of place for great actors. I mean, those actors on Brothers and Sisters are fantastic, you know, and now they're just, you know, they feel stranded.
I disagree with you because I think television is fantastic. The other television,
The
not
other
the network.
television, yeah.
The stories that are coming out for me, and I speak ignorantly here, but the stories that are coming out for me in terms of the complexity and the dimensions of relationships and the plots, I find them to be far more than any television I've ever done or seen in my entire career. And that's a great credit to people like Robbie who are writing that kind of stuff versus the network. I agree the network to me is a broken model. It's not really even satisfying. But, you know, cable and the kind of, you know, Mad Men and Sopranos, all these kind of stories where it's real dramas. It's real dramas, which I think is the future and I would hope is the future. And are playwrights writing for TV now? Yeah,
Well, David Marshall Grant was a playwright. He took over. He runs Brothers and Sisters now, and is trying to make it better. There are a bunch of playwrights. Teresa Rebeck has done it.
Warren Light's doing it. Jackie
Warren,
Langle. It's a
that's
lot of
right.
New York. So I'm just saying, to me, the writers and you can tell in my experience as an actor when you audition for these things, who is a screenwriter and who is a playwright. That's very interesting, even though they're all writing the screenplay. I mean,
But I think that maybe one thing Tyler's referring to is that the models for the templates for television really haven't changed yet, because we have these sort
for
of
network
breakout
television.
shows that don't have they're part of what's so appealing is they're singular. They don't seem to be formulaic, or they're referring to older, not recently explored ideas like, you know, gangster pictures or something, if it's
Right.
Sopranos or something. So that I'm sure that there is, in the mail being sent out, coming across desks, are all these versions of stuff that is kind of the end of its you know, it's the copy of the copy. The Xerox, the original was lost so long ago, so we end up with this kind of thing. There are some guys, I mean, and there are some people who've worked with David Chase and Matt Weiner and these guys who have just pounded their thing through by sheer effort and experience and persistence. So I think the hope that we're talking about too. But I'm sure it hasn't caught up. I'm sure.
No, the networks are terrified. I mean, just this is sort of inside baseball, but they know they're losing audiences. They know that people, record things and don't watch them in real time, and how do they hold on to them? And I think out of that desperation at the networks, actually something good might happen, though it hasn't happened yet. I know for a fact that the things they're doing are like, J.J. Abrams doing a version of Mr. and Mrs. Smith for NBC. There's a sort of quiet, repetition that keeps happening. And it has to die first before,
So it might help if I pay for cable.
or Hulu, I don't know.
Or Hulu. Right, Hulu.
Yeah, pass it over.
Hi, I'm Nick. I was just curious. We're in the second year. Some of us right here in the playwriting program.
Second-year playwriting corner
Yeah.
over there.
Woo!
See you next year.
And we're focusing a lot on rewriting. And I've noticed that my personal experience, and I imagine it's very different from writer to writer, is that I get very rigid after my first draft, and I get kind of frozen, and I worry about messing with my characters too much. And I was just wondering your perspective on if you ever experienced that, or how you get from a first draft or a second draft to a further rewrite, and how that journey progresses for you.
I think it's the trickiest thing. I mean, you don't. I bent over backwards to be this sort of nice, compliant person, even with my other self, and so I would rewrite things until they sort of turned into ricotta cheese in front of me, and so I actually think it's actually quite good to be recalcitrant and stubborn, and we have a playwright, a friend who's almost magisterially, how do you say it? Magisterially stubborn, and it can get in your way at a certain point, but I think you really have to trust your instincts. I do know that the play is usually found after the first draft, in its hiding places between the lines, where like a little mold, it lurks. Sorry to call your play moldy. No, but it's that. It's a weird kind of knowing what you know and trusting. You have to shut out the wrong people, too. That's a really big part of it. There's a machine out there, and someone with a yellow pad is going to schlep in with their degree from Yale and Sarah Lawrence and Harvard all rolled into one ball of genius and sort of plop it down in front of you, and you have to know how not to trust other people's takes. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely.
Like reject
It's-
us.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I would say, I mean, I concur with all of that. I think that I tend to say, or I've told myself, or someone taught me along the way, to pay attention if people say there's a problem, but never, ever pay attention to their solution, because it's always wrong, because they don't know, only you know. But if a bunch of people say something's wrong, then something may be wrong. And I do it as a teacher. I know I give solutions to problems, and I know, as I'm saying them, I know, well, it's probably not right, because I'm not the person, I'm not inside it,
What about the idea, and this is a classic argument we all have with each other in terms of now me talking as an artistic director or producer, the development process, getting rewrites to go to a place where we try to agree that we want the play to go, or we want the no, sorry, Robbie. I can see it coming. No, huh?
No, I'm shaking my head more out of a sense of having. There's the biggest tragedy in my life as a writer is knowing that certain plays of mine would have been better if they hadn't, gone through the wise machinery And I just stuck to that early thought. And it is a horrible feeling to lose a play like that. It's still, I mean, my last play, Paris Letter, the first version of it was actually sort of had kinetic energy. And then the one that was, I think, on stage, that ended up on stage, well, it still had a sort of value to it. In the writing, it had become kind of polite. And you have to live with that loss, learn from it, and move on. So I'm very wary of development. But I'm very wary of it, but I don't, nor do I think, though, that, every word is a gem. But I think the collaboration has to be kept into a very tight, you find that director that gets it, and maybe one other person, whether it's the artistic director or.
What about the actor, though? Now I hear what you're saying exactly. I even agree with you.
The actor's always right. I'm not kidding, actually. The actors always know. The only time the actors are wrong is when they've worked with you for too long. Because then
they know.
Then they know more, yeah. I had an actor that I've worked with on so many pieces who said to me recently last thing we did together, he actually said in rehearsal, "What you mean is this?" And I was like, I looked like a cartoon, like Yosemite Sam with smoke, I was like, no, so, but most of the time an actor in the moment, if actually is right. That's how I go about it.
And do you, when that happens, though, now how do you translate into what, I'm reading a script and all of a sudden I'll say something or something happens and I need another few words or these words are in the way of where I know we've got to, then are you then in my head watching me or are you in your script watching me?
I have a disease. I just have an empathy disease, which many shrinks could tell you if you wanted proof. But I'm in their skin.
Right. Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Couple more questions.
Really, it's a really tricky process. The development process and the rewriting. It's very scary. But I'm working with Becca now, a recent graduate, and I said to her today, I was like, we're in a workshop, 29-hour workshop. We have a week to kind of put stuff together, and she's, Marissa Tomei and Jenny Mudge, really good actors, also scary. And I said to her today, we were talking about the scenes, talking about getting actors' input, and I said it was like you drove up last week with a car that was a pretty good car that ran, and then I decided to take it all apart, and now it's just in pieces on the driveway, and we're like, but the car ran before, and she's got to believe that the car actually, it's going to be better when we get through with it, and she's great because she's defenseless and wants to learn, but it's I think it's very frightening for writers to give up something.
You're very good at that. Like you can dismantle things and build and rebuild them, and that's one of your strengths. I think that's very rare.
Mm-hmm. I hope I am, because otherwise some people are coming on Monday and they're just going to be looking at the driveway with a bunch of.
But also, I got to say now, from my vantage point, I mean,
I like dramaturgy. So
I was going to say one of the things that's most exciting for me is in the acting of it is to work in the director to have that conversation. Yeah. Oftentimes, depending on the status of whoever's in the room, you have a voice or you don't. Mm-hmm. But when you do have a voice and you have a collaboration between the playwright, the actor, and the director, and can actually be part of that conversation, I think that is the most thrilling thing for me. Either as a producer or as an actor.
I do. I mean, Becca today was in the room with Marissa, and they went through scene by scene with the character finally after a few days and just talked about every scene, essentially every line, what was going on, what Marissa's very intuitive and powerfully emotional actress, and talking about the emotional line of the character. It was an opportunity for an actor to have input at a very early stage. There's, of course, a danger to that it's, Becca's got to hold on to her play now and absorb the emotional, authentic reality of what else is going on stage. It's going to be very, very interesting.
I have a question about Naked Angels. You guys spoke to it a little bit already, but I'm curious as to just what a couple things are that made it work, where I think so many probably fail. And I'm fascinated by the possibility of collaborating on projects with people that I'm meeting in this school.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of this school, I feel, that we have wonderful playwrights, wonderful directors and actors, and we And you feel it in our collab class when you get a good script and you get a passionate cast and a director who gets it and wants to make everything work. And I wonder what you guys found that helped, that made you guys stand out, where I'm sure, I mean, there's a lot of people in the city trying to do something new.
You know more than I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, and they're very, Naked Angels was charmed in one way, but in several ways. One, it sort of came about at a time when the real estate market itself was very low. I mean, you could actually rent, a horrible space, but nonetheless, for
It was
like,
yours.
yeah, and we had a space for a while. I mean, the economics of being a theater company allowed for a certain amount of freedom and not having to do productions. We didn't charge for productions. We never had critics didn't come in for 10 years. I mean, there was a certain flexibility that we had that I'm very, the only thing that makes me happy right now about the state of things is that the entire commercial real estate market will crash and a bunch of new theater companies will start up and have homes. And I hope that happens. I mean, I think that is one thing that may happen. So that, we were charmed about that. And there were some actors who people knew.
Yeah.
And people came to see. And if that had only been that, probably it wouldn't have lasted. And then playwrights people came to see new stuff.
Yeah, looking from the outside, I would say that it was cool and groovy. There were some name actors that people wanted to see. And then, surprise of all surprises, we got very interesting work. Very interesting people doing very interesting work, and they were true to themselves. They weren't trying to transfer the show to Broadway, or it was just true unto itself. So
We couldn't have if we'd wanted to. It would never have happened. We were too, it was like a small Baltic nation in a circular firing squad.
That's
Just
exactly.
trying to-
And I think it's an organic truth. They had an authenticity unto themselves that me looking from the outside in, you wanted to be a part of it. You wanted to know what they were doing. You wanted to see what they were saying. And then the playwrights gave real form and voice to it.
But we also pretended that nobody was, we pretended that it was just for us. We
That's
really
true.
did. And that's, I think, one of the things that is useful to try and do is it's just this strange form of Asperger's between you and the play and the work, It's just,
Yeah.
and nothing else counts.
We
And,
never kind of worried about that people would come.
No.
I don't think that ever crossed anyone's mind. We also tended to do kind of large cast things, so there were a lot of people in the cast, so they would invite their friends, and that's like a way of ensuring an audience in a way. Because there's only there's like 97 people who go to off-Broadway theater. And if you know the bulk of them, then you have some people in the house, which is nice, It's good. So I don't know. I mean, Atlantic started the same time we do, and they are such a different company. They've lasted.
They're disciplined.
Extremely
We're like
disciplined.
the
They're the
shelter
WASP.
dog.
Yeah, I mean,
We're
they
like
were.
the dogs from a shelter, and they're like, highly disciplined German shepherds.
Yes, they always had a plan. They always
are,
had.
like-
They had like officers. I mean, who really did
They
things.
had
and-
officers. You
yeah,
could get
like,
you could get punished, with them, and the idea of punishing a naked angel. What would you do? Like,
Right.
take away their pesto pizza?
So it was a completely different model, and
Yeah.
that survived. So I don't know if it's in the model so much. I mean, we were very lucky.
They were very
very
ambitious
lucky.
at Atlantic. They were, Naked Angels was much more like, I don't mean this to sound weird again, like Fly Your Freak flag, but Naked Angels was much more like New School in a way. It was sort of, what are we going to do now? This is great. Let's just do it. Whereas, David Mamet was always hovering over them in a, Israeli Defense Force uniform.
Well, who's got the mic?
Okay, I have a question. Going on what he's saying about collab, I do believe that this program allows us to have that possibility of changing roles and being aware of what's it like to have your own voice if you're a playwright or if you're an actor and how to negotiate. Because whether you know what you want to say or what your soul wants to say, it's a matter also of being flexible to manage to work on a team. And I would like to know for you, Pippin, and that you started saying that you've been directing and you were honest enough to say that I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong, but I would like to know what have you learned about the whole acting process by taking that other path?
You mean in terms of directing? Well, first of all, actually, CoLab, and Robbie's you've seen a couple of these things in the
Yeah.
production. I mean, CoLab for me has been the heart of the part. It's what I really
Why don't
love.
you
and
just
it's
define
actually-
collab for the camera?
So the CoLab is the once a week class where all of the tracks, actors, writers, and playwrights work together, and generally on new plays. We've worked pretty much on new plays, so I learned a lot about. I've had the opportunity to watch a lot of things and think about my ideas about directing as I've been working in CoLab. And as those of you who have me in CoLab know, I step so far over the boundary of the writing instructor, it's ridiculous. But Ellie's always been very nice about letting me wander into the directorial side of things, so it's been very good. But I mean, I think it's the skill of talking to actors and the skill of taking a story and finding out what is, and I don't want to be overly rudimentary, but active about it and actually sort of forward moving and compelling, and what makes you want to turn the page, what makes you want to keep watching, is something that is not, it's inherent in writers, and an intuitive kind of tell the story kind of thing, but it's not something that you can, it's not a skill that you want to have that frequency in your brain all the time when you're working on. So what's been really interesting for me, which is all I can say, is sort of being between the playwright's world and the actor's world, and kind of the handoff, hopefully. So I don't know if I can really speak to it in a big way, but it's certainly it's been as fundamentally different directing as it would be for actors to come in, which I always encourage them to do, and sit on the other side of a casting table, because you're really looking at a play in a whole new way. You kind of have to turn off as a playwright, you want your play to be 100 amazing things, and as a director, you have to convince the playwright that you're going to make it one great thing that will also incorporate those other 99 if you just trust me. And so that's kind of what you
Molly?
do.
Alex? Sorry.
So I have a question, I guess, about the artist politic, I guess. It seems like in your career you've been able to interact with political events without, either personally, I don't know, but without your product being sarcastic or full of despair or, and I guess I'm looking for, I don't necessarily need advice, but maybe a reflection on how, as artists, we can interact or comment or interact with the political realm without it becoming satire, anger.
I think it's what your nature tells you. I mean, it's who organically I'm nothing if not angry, and my politics are very angry. But it's because it's so personal. I mean, for me, politics comes out of learning about yourself and learning about what you really are, and trying to discern the difference between what's public and what's private. I think politics has to do with sex and childhood and upbringing, but that's me. And I think the easiest thing to do is to sort of respond to the lie of politics with a sneer. And at this point, in a weird kind of way, it's hard to satirize that which is already so absurd. I'll give you an example of what's happening with me, and it might have to do with my illness of having empathy. But I've spent a year with Dick Cheney now, and I believe I understand what he was feeling and thinking. For instance, when he ordered planes shot down from the bunker in the White House. So I think we're talking about the degree to which we allow ourselves to inhabit characters. It ends up creating a kind of empathy in a way that can be useful. It could also be weak at the same time if you let go of your anger. But it has to do with the person you actually are. You know, what do you believe? What do you really believe? What do you see that makes you angry? How do you want to interpret it? I'm fascinated by, I don't know that it's always successful. I haven't always been successful at it. There isn't an easy way through it. It's case by case and day by day. I read a lot. I look at things that mean something to me, like a movie like The Conformist, that converges sexuality and politics in the most exquisite, private way. And I learned something about the world from that. I recognized something. Personally, I was very influenced by the playwright who actually influenced me the most, if I had such a thing, was David Hare, whose politics I've always found to be remarkable and complex and variegated, and who gives the villain the best stuff. And that's an act of generosity and canniness. And so it's come out of maybe seeing that, and also the childhood, the world, the life I lived. You know, personally, like I grew up, I spent formative years in South Africa during apartheid. And so I watched my own sort of moral disintegration under that system. And now I can't lie to myself about how great I am. Do you know what I mean? Or about how great liberalism is. I can't sustain the false vision of my groovy lefty life. I have to go deeper than that, and that's just it. It's about looking in.
One more question? Okay.
Oh God. Hi.
Microphone? There it comes.
Hi, Robbie.
Hi.
So, you said that David Hare is one of the playwrights you admire, and I know that you keep trying with network television, even though, you know, it's not the best right now. So I didn't know if there was a television writer or several television writers or anything that you admired as well, or if you just kind of were
Well,
hoping.
Wow. I love what Matt Weiner did at. I think that show, Mad Men, is a microcosm of a changing world, and it's totally relevant about what men are like today and what women are like and how we got to where we are. And I'm sort of impressed by the fact that he was able to do that, to take that leap, and I suppose I feel that way about David Chase and depression, you know, and psychology and the ambiguity of capitalism and morality, and so those two people I really admire in television. I think probably when I was a kid, watching Norman Lear's shows like All in the Family sort of sparked something in me in a big way. Like, they're real. Those people are real. They're being real. It's funny, but it's very, very real. And I'm afraid it's very seldom, you know, I have a huge problem with the sort of comfortable white world of television as it exists on networks now, where even if people are diverse, they're fabulous in their diversity, you know, and everything has started to look like, you know, that movie It's Complicated, where people are, even in the making of Brothers and Sisters, you know, it's supposed to be about a sort of middle-class family and a failing business, they live in a mansion and they drive, Audis and Mercedes, and it's sort of pornographic in that sense. So I do, I do hope, but I don't know. It doesn't have the same role model thing aspirationally for me.
One more question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Molly.
Hello. I read your New York Times article, Arts and Humanity, and you spoke of the new generation needing to produce an elegant art, but how elegant art is as small as the needle of an eye. So whether or not...
Did I say that? I don't remember this. Maybe it's someone else.
Elegant is smaller than the eye of a needle. And I really like that quote.
You did a long time
You did
ago.
say it. It was beautiful, but I'm just...
So maybe this is when you gave back your NEA money.
Well, just regardless, if you did hear
When
someone...
did I say this?
We don't want to admit that.
art and humanity, well, regardless.
Okay, well, I stand by it.
As someone who has delved into all three of our mediums and coming from a generation that does not have a national theater and also comes from a generation where we seem to be semi-desensitized with true emotion, how would you... How can we create an elegant art in order to push our generation in a positive way? Because I think that's what we all want to do.
It's as subjective as taste. It's sort of, how did Coco Chanel know what a perfect line looked like? It's that, though. It's why did Yves Saint Laurent know what that cut was? Why did Philip Johnson? Why did Frank Lloyd Wright know that, that somehow the Johnson Wax Building depended on curves that were soft in some... It's a combination of a intrinsic exposure, deep exposure, constant exposure, critical exposure and questioning and probing and I think quite often anger is a part of that probing. A dissatisfaction with what is normative, that you develop this thing called taste. Doesn't necessarily come, there are two kinds. Some kids are born with it and then, go on to make masterpieces, but it's also about, like, for instance, it was Robert Hughes, the art critic, who explained why I liked, in a way that I understood, why I liked a particular Rothko. And then you develop, what you have to know how to do is follow your instincts. That's the one thing I'm capable of doing in life, is I can dedicate days, weeks, months to following my instinct and nothing getting in the way of that. And that's all I could say to it.
I want to thank Pippin Parker. I want to thank, sorry, Pippin. I want to thank Pippin Parker, Chair of Playwriting, New School for Drama, and our esteemed guest, Robbie Bates.
Thank you.
Playwright, producer, faculty member.
Yeah.
Bon vivant. And good all-around guy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.